My name is Rick Moore, and I'm the host of Right. And today I'm interviewing Jude Matulich-Hall, further getting into her book, The Eversteam Chronicles. And top of the morning to you, Jude.
Top of the morning, Rick.
All right, let's start out with basic questions and pick up where we left off last time, right?
Right.
Explain sparks again to our listeners.
Okay, so sparks are um, they're organic. They look like regular stones, but they are actually power sources, and so they are activated by harmonic resonance. And when their harmonic resonance, when
That's
a
a hard
spark
word to say correctly, right?
right together, harmonic resonance. When a spark's harmonic resonance is reached, it activates the spark.
Right?
So it might be a flat stone. I mean, just like, think of what rocks look like in your yard, right?
Right.
So so the harmonic resonance activates the spark, so it breaks up and it has an energy source in the center,
I see.
and then they become orbs of energy, and they can be
Okay.
used
Do you have a
in
coating on the outside or the rock on the
there.
outside or
It's kind of like, you can imagine like particles of the rock itself, but it's like
right?
molten swirling energy. So the characteristics of the rock are still there. So kind of
Right?
like what the sun looks like, or what
Oh, okay.
the
Okay.
core of the earth looks like, the swirling mass of energy. And then once and they to continue the having them release energy, they
Right.
can be charged. So in order for the spark to keep giving energy, it has to receive energy. So that's from natural elements: the sun, wind, water,
I was going to
earth.
ask you how they recharge, but you say the wind can recharge a spark too.
And so, like, for
How is that
instance,
possible? I mean,
well, it is a fantasy universe. But
I
so if
see.
for instance, I'm trying to think of so in the story, Ratchet, the clockwork dog, has a
Right.
spark in it, and they're traveling through hell, and his spark happens to be a fire spark, and so the heat from hell actually keeps his spark
Oh,
charged.
so there are different types of sparks, right?
There are different types of sparks, like any element you can possibly think of, and then the sub elements. So you've got sun sparks, and you have moonlight sparks. I delve into moonlight sparks later in other stories. And that's just how they're charged. So things like flashlights, torches, and lanterns, and cars, like a lot of them have sparks. Now, at the same time, there is still the other forms of energy used in
Right.
this world. So, like, there are still people using coal. It's still steam, but because sparks are kind of expensive. The thing is, well, and maybe I think you ask a question. You have another question that I can delve into that
Yeah.
more.
Right.
Excuse me.
You created a fascinating world, by the way.
Thank
Explain if you would, the ancient races and their entry into this world of humans.
So they were here first. And
Okay.
so I call them Fae, Fae. So for those who don't understand what Fae is, it's fairy, so it's the fairy races. So
Right.
the races that the elves and the ogres and the trolls and pixies and all those dragons,
Right.
the fantasy races. So they were here first, way back before the humans crawled out of the trees and started started evolving. So and the Fae, welcomed the human race in.
Right.
And so like I said, they didn't enter this world. They were here first when humans entered the world, and
I
then they just they welcomed the humans to the world, into the world.
Okay. All
Help
right.
them take their baby steps through evolution.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So the Fae welcomed the humans in,
Yeah.
right? Was that the only race that was around at that time, or?
Well, all the ones I listed, I mean, anything you can, like elves, dragons, ogres, trolls, pixies,
they all comprise
mermaids.
Right?
I'm sorry?
Mermaids.
Yeah.
Really? They all
I call them mer people.
Okay. They all comprise the ancient races, right?
Yep. All of them, the gorgons, any of those mythical creatures, vampires, werewolves, all of it.
Really? They're all part of it, right?
They're all part of it, yeah.
Okay. Now, explain, if you would, what is a great peace and how did that come about?
So the Great Peace was, so there was battles, of course, between peoples, and pixies didn't get along with dragons, and the elves didn't get along with the dwarves, and the, etc.
Oh boy.
And so there was constant battles. You can imagine, if you can imagine many of the fantasy stories of how warring was taking place between the races.
Sure.
And so when humans came along, as they evolved, they started building villages and cities where everyone could live. And so it was like the human race brought together these other races. And so there was 300 years of...
Wait, the human race brought together the warring factions?
Yes.
I'll be darned.
Humans brought peace.
Well, we did something right?
They did something right. And so, the ancient races started cooperating with each other, and they started building together. And so there was this span of, I think I put 300 years. I'd actually, I wrote that a long time ago. So I believe the Great Peace lasted 300 years of where there was no wars for 300 years because everybody was at peace. So that was the Great Peace. Yeah.
Okay, we must have done a good job of it, right? So explain, if you would, your theory of the great building process. In other words, how things came to be.
How things came to be.
Yeah.
Well, I don't shy away from evolution, so obviously, my universe kind of takes this, follows the same process that we would think from a scientific view that Earth took place, how we came about. So, there was nothing, and then there was something, the great Big Bang, Big Bang Theory. Right. And is that what you meant? Or
yeah, I was curious, right?
That's that. I would follow the same scientific routes of reality of our.
I thought it meshed better with the Hindu theory of evolution.
It really does. I don't think it's much different, but I like playing with those aspects. I try to keep it more vague. And some of that stuff I'm still figuring out myself. Honestly, I mean, we don't,
Well, that's the truth of it, and I think it's pretty good,
sure.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, and if I were to
figure it out,
I think if I were to try to figure out every single aspect of my universe before putting out a book, I'd still be working on it, So it's like, well, some of that stuff is gonna have to come. I'm gonna come up with it.
Right. By the time that the great building process was done, were there still as many varieties of creatures that there were, in the ancient races, or did they begin to die off?
Well, so the way humans brought the Fae together, right, and they brought peace, right. But as humans evolved, they kind of started. They started. Technology comes into play. And so whereas the Fae didn't really have technology before, they didn't, they worked the land by hand and with animals, and it was a very natural world. The humans started creating machines, and they started stripping the land of resources. And so that starts getting out of hand And so whereas humans brought peace in, humans actually start
Cause division.
over everything. Because, and I do explain this in the book, is those that have shorter lives tend to want to hurry more. They have more babies. They populate more. Whereas a being that can live 500, 1,000 years, they don't need that so much, right? Is they can take their time, and they don't populate as much. And so the human race, they start populating like bunnies. And so yes, the Fae do start getting pushed out. And humans start getting greedy because the Fae, seeing what's happening to the earth, seeing areas of land completely devastated, which didn't happen before because there were practices of replenishing constantly going on, being in tune with the earth. Humans change that. Humans flip it on its head, and the Fae start seeing that things are just being devastated. And so the Fae stand up. Well, the humans decide, well, you can't tell us what to do.
As humans tend to do, right?
Yeah. And that's where, and of course, because sparks are so important to this world, humans, and the Fae did kind of share the information about the sparks, but they
came to regret that.
I'm sorry?
They came to regret that?
They came to regret it, but they also realized that maybe we shouldn't tell them about these other aspects that the sparks hold. Because one thing that the humans did was that the humans actually figured out how to drain the sparks, which is almost impossible.
Really?
But because of their want and need and greed to have power,
right,
they actually, they don't replenish the land, they don't replenish the sparks. So the sparks that they have that start just getting drained, and then they can't even be charged at that point. It's like they turn to nothing. They dissipate, they turn to dust, and they no longer exist. So it's just a very sapping kind of world that the Fae are seeing the humans do. Because I think humans are I don't know if we're too smart for our own good or too dumb for, it's like there's this weird thing. We get technology, we get information and knowledge, and we just stretch it to its limits. Like, how far can we stretch this until it snaps? It's not, let's make this sustainable. It's like, no, how far can we push?
I guess that's what you meant when you said that humans progress beyond their own abilities.
Yes, absolutely. And we see it every day, right? Of just people not ever having enough, not being content with what they have, and just constantly needing to push the limits. See how much can we use this until it's gone, instead of let's use this and like I said, replenish.
Right.
Right. And so I am using those aspects in this story, bringing those aspects into the story.
All right. Tell us about the first War of the Sparks.
So that's where this is leading up to. Is so the first war of the Sparks, because the Sparks represent power on more than one level. They power machines, but they also they become. So I'm going to back up a little bit. So as cities and stuff started to be built, and people started coming together, at first everything was done bartering system, but then they realized that as more people get into smaller areas, a source of some sort of something that they can pay with. So sparks became the smaller sparks became like, what am I trying to think of? Money, but
right?
Yeah. Currency. That's the word I was thinking of.
Yep.
It became the currency. And so of course, whoever has the most currency is going to have the most power, and sparks are literally power.
Are sparks ubiquitous?
What do you mean by that? Like
well, are they prevalent?
They are prevalent, right? Yeah. Oh, they're all over. Yeah. and I'm not going to say that every rock on the planet is a spark, but you know, they can be, well, they're kind of mined, like the water, seawater. You know, there are sparks in the waters that the mer people have, and there are sparks in the volcanoes that the dragons can, you know, that found.
Right.
And so there are sparks everywhere. And so in a way, it's kind of like a cultivating them, you know, gathering them.
Right.
But humans like actually start to mine large areas, and that's where
Really?
the devastation comes in. And
And the Fae and the other creatures that are existent
mhm.
don't.
They do, but they replenish, and they don't need to keep gathering sparks, because the sparks that they have, they take care of, and they recharge them. They use the
Right.
sparks the way they should be used, so that the sparks don't run out. But humans have found a way to use all the energy from the spark
Right.
without replenishing. And so it's like, it's throwaway, right? It's like, oh, this doesn't work anymore. I'm just going to throw it away, and I'm going to go get these other ones over here.
So I guess that's what you mean by with excess
Comes greed.
there comes greed.
Mm-hmm.
And what came of it in this world? The wars?
Yeah, so the war, the humans and Fae separated.
Just humans and Fae, or
Humans against Fae. Yeah.
against every kind of creature that existed?
Yes, yeah. The magical race, the ancient races. Yeah. And so humans decided, you know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, the magical races existed in this reality. They weren't in unreality.
Not yet. Yeah, not yet. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the war started because the Fae wanted to protect the earth and wanted to protect what was there, and humans just wanted more and more and more. But the problem is humans started to build war machines. And so, you know, whereas you have these races with bows and arrows and axes and, you know, they're animals pulling plows and stuff. So everything just got way out of balance, and humans way too powerful. And so they start wiping out the Fae, because the humans are, it's our world now. Like, you had your time, but we're obviously like growing. We're more numerous than you. We've got these machines that can take over land, and we want the sparks. And so they just started taking.
Does that mean that the ancient races were driven out?
Yes, they were driven out. And Eversteam was the last stand, basically. So more and more the world, you know, the Fae got driven out, and so they ended up in one place. Which, the thing about Eversteam is in the continent in the middle of an ocean.
Right.
And so they ended up, well, the ones that survived, because I mean, it was slaughter, you know, left and right. So the ones that survived took their last stand at Eversteam, in Eversteam.
Right.
And so when the people found them there, they the Fae were just like, okay, you know, enough is enough. We're going to be wiped out if we don't do something. And so they realized that the world was no longer theirs, and they, because it's a magical world, we have on the flip side of this reality, we have unreality, which is an alternate universe, an alternate plane that exists from the energies of people no longer believing in things. So you can think of everything a human can possibly think of, right, and create, and then stop believing in. And we can see it in our own history, right, of the belief of gods and the way things happen, but then we realize, oh, that's not the way it's created, so we throw that away. Well, that energy goes somewhere, and it created a world called and that the humans call unreality. So the Fae were like, okay, so humans don't need us anymore. Humans don't need magic anymore. So the Fae chose to leave, and they go into unreality, and they
Did the Fae
disappear from this
have
world.
magical powers to counter the humans' machines, or were the machines dominant?
The machines were definitely dominant,
Okay,
they were just it was too powerful, I mean, it's like a gun against a bow and arrow, right? We've
right,
seen that in our own history. So
right.
that's, yeah. And I think
The
the
people
thing
with the
with,
bow and arrows get wiped out, right?
sure, they get wiped out, yeah.
Yep.
And sheer numbers, the
All right,
sheer
explain
number,
how the
yeah.
how and why the humans abandoned magic.
Well, they didn't need it anymore. They had all this power, they have all these machines, they know how to use they know how to take from the planet to
Right,
do what they want, so they just don't need it anymore. They're like, oh, I don't have time to waste on this, because you have to give back, like, you have to
right,
give back into magic in my world anyway.
right.
If you don't give if you don't give if you if you don't give back to the magic that you're taking,
Right.
there is no reciprocation. So it just dwindles anyway.
So
The
magic is finite, right?
Yeah, in my world it is. Oh
Right.
yeah, I have lots of limitations on
So it
my,
can be exhausted.
it can be exhausted, and it is. It does get exhausted. Because when the Eversteam Chronicles happens, there's
Right.
not a whole lot of magic in the world.
Ah,
And this story is about some of that magic coming back into the world and what happens.
right. All right. Now
The
explain
chaos that
what,
ensues.
yeah, I can see that, right? Explain what secret sparks are.
So secret sparks are a secret. I can't tell you. I'd have to kill you. No.
Well
Um,
done.
so there is this aspect of um, um, so there are these sparks in the Eversteam Chronicles. The spark we're dealing with there is called the immortality spark.
All right.
And so there are these larger sparks that exist that are rare. And I mention a couple of them in this book, and I do delve into other. There's going to be in my next book. It's the creation spark, and that's the reason why unreality was actually able to be created. But their power, they are magical, and
Right.
not only do they are activated by a harmonic resonance, just like the other sparks, but if special words, magical words, are spoken with this harmonic resonance, um, it it creates magic on its own. So like the immortality spark, for instance, if a person were able to activate the immortality spark
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
and use it, I mean, they would become immortal. They could,
Oh, really?
yeah. And there's also the Abaddon spark, which is basically a spark that Satan
Right.
great. That's mentioned a little bit, and the creation spark created a whole realm. So they're very powerful, can be very dangerous if the
Are there
wrong
any
hands.
people that have tapped into the resources of the immortality spark?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear
Are,
the first part of your
are
question.
there many people that have tapped into the resources of the immortality spark? Or is
Um,
it yet to be tapped?
it's yet to be tapped. The well, the it's taken care of in the Eversteam Chronicles. So,
Oh, really?
yeah. So I can't. If I were to tell you what happens with the spark, I'm going to tell you the end of the story.
Well, don't do that. Don't do that.
But people have tried, and there is one person, Sean O'Connell, who he's actually he tries to gather. He's good at finding these sparks, and he works for the establishment, which
Right.
is it's kind of the babysitter of governments.
Right.
So this establishment was established to make sure that the people in power didn't get
Too much power.
too much power. And
Right.
so the establishment was created to keep balance. the whole world. But then they of course, because people are people.
Yep.
The establishment starts to realize, well, we can have power too. We're the babysitter of all these people in power, but we could actually we can run it all if we
Which
have
again
these
gets back to what you
sparks.
meant by with excess, there comes greed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those that are supposed to be making balance starts tipping the scales. But they and it started out with good intentions. Sean O'Connell is one of the people that work for the establishment, and he's sent out to find these sparks so that governments don't get their hands on
Right.
them. But when he finds, and it's explained in the book, when he finds the immortality spark, he realizes that nobody should have their hands on this. It's too tempting. Like even the establishment that is supposedly going to be keeping everything balanced, that it just shouldn't. There should be no access to these things. And so it's kind of it's his job, but it's also his moral obligation he wants to find these sparks before anybody else does, and put them where they belong, because they all belong somewhere.
Right.
And that's why I won't say where the immortality spark belongs.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that then, and that'll end our interview today. We'll take it up again next week.
All right.
Right?
Sounds
With
good.
author Jude Matulich-Hall. Jude, what's your website address?
So my website address is really easy. It's www.jude, Jude, Matulich, Matulich, Hall, Hall.com. So
All
Jude
right.
Matulich-Hall.
And how can people find you on Facebook?
They can find me under Eversteam Chronicles.
Right.
Eversteam Chronicles, Eversteam Chronicles. They
Right.
can also find me at JMH Writers and Illustrators. And
your
I'm
book
all over
is-
social media under my name.
Yep. Your book is the Eversteam Chronicles, right?
Yep, that's it.
All right. Till next time then.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.